More on this now from our Powerhouse Roundtable, joined by George Will, Donna, Brazile. So two members of Congress, both from Texas, Louie Gohmert, Republican, Joaquin, Castro, Democrat, and George. Setting aside Donald Trump for a second, it does appear that there has been an intensity of activity in Iowa this year, particularly on the Republican side, even though we saw Claire McCaskill out there for Hillary this weekend, in part because this is so wide open in the GOP.
Both parties will be nominating someone who's not president, so that does open it up a lot. The Democratic field looks, they have a weak bench, and I should think they'd be careful what they wish for if they wish to clear the field and have no competition. I think the last time they had an almost uncontested nomination was 56 with Adlai Stevenson. He probably would have been beaten anyway, but he certainly was beaten, and I think competition's good for parties. The Republican Party is going to get their fill of it.
No question about that, but there does not appear to be all that much competition yet, understandably, with Hillary Clinton out there kind of freezing the field.
Well, I don't think so. Martin O'Malley has made some noise recently that he's interested. Of course, we have Joe Biden, Kirsten Gillibrand, the senator from the great state here of New York. Elizabeth Warren, there's a lot of buzz around her. And, of course, Governor Cuomo here from New York, a lot of talk. And let me not forget Joe Biden, because he will call me this afternoon to remind me. So I do think while it's too early to handicap the race, there's no question if Hillary Clinton gets into the race, there will be a coronation of her, because there are so many Democrats who last time around supported her, who I think are anxious to see her back out there again.
And Congressman, I read somewhere this week that your brother, Julian Castro, mayor of San Antonio, heading to Iowa as well, and you might be accompanying him?
Although he's not running for anything, so it's going to be fun. But yeah, he's headed out to the Harkins steak fry up there in September. So
a lot of tilling of the ground. Congressman, let me bring this back to you, though, because it does seem that there's a brewing potential civil war inside the Republican Party. You heard Sarah Palin last night say she was on the side of Team Rand Paul versus Chris Christie.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of competition out there. But with regard to the Democrats, I seem to remember in 2007, this was Hillary's nomination. Obama may run just so he'll be ready in 2016. The point being, you never know. And I think that's true where we are with the Republicans. I don't think you could say, I mean, I would never have predicted that somebody named McCain would end up being the nominee after 2007, when the story was at one point he was so low he had to carry his own bags. And I also don't think you should underestimate the power Iowa has to attract people to the state fair of the fried butter. It is incredible. It is absolutely incredible.
It's an excellent point.
Republicans have had a lot of experience with Civil War. 1912, Roosevelt and Taft split. 1964, the Rockefeller and the Goldwater. But what the Republicans need to bear in mind is one number, and it's 242. There are 18 states, and the District of Columbia have voted Democratic in 6 consecutive elections back to 92. If a Democrat holds that base, that candidate spends the fall looking for 28 electoral votes. They got 242 in those states, and they'll find them.
And I think what's most problematic for Republicans at this point is that they seem to be taken right now by the Tea Party more extreme base. So the candidates that are most appealing right now are the Ted Cruz's, the Rand Pauls, those folks. And I think if they nominate somebody like that, it will be 1964 all over again, because that's just not where the majority of Americans
are. Is that your fear, Congressman?
Well, not really. I mean, when I go to the Tea Parties, I see people from all races, ages, genders. The thing they have in common is they're paying income tax. And I don't think you should rule out the District of Columbia voting for a Republican if we'll go ahead and pass my bill that ends the unfairness for the D.C. In their income tax. They don't have a full voting member of Congress.
D.C. goes Republican, that will
so get rid of their income tax, the Gohmert bill.
The Pew survey says that 84% of Tea Party voters vote in primaries. They're intense, they're organized, and they come out to vote, and that's going to matter, particularly in Iowa. If you have a crowded Republican field, and Rand Paul starts with his father's constituency in a crowded field, that's a plurality vote.
I don't think he has his father's constituency.
But the Tea Party is like a controlled wildfire that is now burning the Republican Party, especially the Republican Party establishment. So I don't know if the Tea Party is good for the Republican Party in 2016, given the fact that it has narrowed the base of the party.
And it's igniting an immediate confrontation right now. You mentioned...
And I think that's why, George, I really think that they have about 1 or 2 more election cycles where they can continue like this. Otherwise, the infighting is getting so severe that I just don't see how you sustain that.
Let's talk about the one coming right now. September 30th, government runs out of funding. You've got people like Rand Paul and Ted Cruz, other Republicans, Marco Rubio, saying unless Obamacare is defunded, then we shouldn't approve the government funding. President Obama took that on Friday.
My friends in the other party have made the idea of preventing these people from getting health care their holy grail, their number one priority, the one unifying principle.
That was the only thing that seemed to get the president really riled up on Friday. George Will says it's an ideological fixation. How does it play out? Do you believe that faction inside the Republican Party is going to succeed in pushing their leaders to hold the line?
Wait, that's a false narrative. He said that we're trying to keep people from having health care. That's just not true. That is an absolute blatant lie. We are not trying to keep anybody from getting health care, and whether or not they have insurance under an exchange or not does not prevent people from getting health care.
Want to take that on?
Well, sure. The fact is you have millions and millions of Americans that can't afford health insurance. Obamacare is helping people get health insurance. Republicans have offered no other solutions or plans
at this point. Of them, Joaquin.
But at this point, Louie, it's just ideology. It's just extreme ideology.
So getting to the point of does the government shut down on September 30th?
Well, the congressman says that's a lie. Remember what Mark Twain said, the difference between a lie and a cat is a cat only has 9 lives? The fact is that this president has the power, particularly when as supported as this one is by the mainstream media, to set the narrative. And the narrative will be that the Republicans have chosen simply to cause chaos. And I think it's a bad idea.
Bad idea to go down the line.
You cannot govern this country from one half of one of our 3 branches of government. Can't be done.
It appears, Donna, that Speaker of the House, John Boehner, probably agrees with that as well. Mitt Romney came out this week, one of his few public speeches since leaving, warning Republicans about being accused of shutting down the government.
Well, look, Mitt Romney, of course, Romney cares, Obamacare. They're not, they're not what I call distant relatives, but they might be, kissing cousins. But he came out in support of John McCain and others who believe that this is a foolish idea to try to shut the government down. And, of course, many of the veterans of previous government shutdowns, Newt Gingrich and others, are also, speaking out as well.
So what's going to happen?
Well, I don't know, but I do think that even though we're one half of the legislating body from which no spending occurs unless we agree, that is a position that allows us to force others to adhere to the Constitution. We don't have to wait for the Supreme Court. We can force that. And we can say, you're going to abide by the Constitution, whether the Supreme Court gets it wrong or right. We have the ability to force respect for the law, and some of us think that we ought to force them to do that.
Do you think you have the votes to defund Obamacare? It doesn't appear like that to me.
Not right now, but we'll see after August, after people go home. And as far as Obamacare, though, when the president himself says it's not ready, so I'm giving this break to all big business, what about the poor guy out there making $14,000? He's going to pay extra income tax if he cannot afford to pay the several $1,000s for an Obamacare policy. Who's caring about him? Well, a lot of us do, but it's not this president because he didn't let the individual mandate have a year off. That only goes to big business. That's not fair.
Well, I would say, first of all, it is the law of the land. The Congress passed it, the president signed it, and a conservative Supreme Court upheld it, Louie. I mean, it is the law of the land.
So how does he get to delay a year for just rewrite and say we're going to delay it for a year?
The problem is that the House Republicans, all due respect, I'm a former Hill staffer, not a member, of course, but they cannot even agree among themselves with spending. I mean, just before the recess, they couldn't even pass a transportation HUD bill. I mean, I don't understand the Republican Party these days. I mean, they've set these budgetary goals, and they're afraid to meet them.
No, we're not afraid to meet them, but Donna, you need to also remember, and I think Lyndon Johnson said it, that if 2 people agree on everything, one of them's unnecessary. It's good to have a good disagreement. That's how we.
Lots of
that's how we got to the Constitution.
I got to move on here. Lots of disagreements as well over immigration reform. We just heard Donald Trump say that passing it would be a death wish for the Republican Party. President Obama spoke out on that on Friday as well, making this claim.
I am absolutely confident that if that bill was on the floor of the House they would pass. The problem is internal Republican caucus politics.
Which means, George, well, that bill, the Senate bill, unlikely to reach the floor of the House of Representatives, at least in short term.
And if it did, it would not pass. Republicans...
When it gets blue-slipped, it's unconstitutional. It goes straight back.
Well, what Republicans keep hearing is people like the New York Times that really wants the Republican Party to go away, saying if only the Republican Party would pass immigration reform, it would prosper. Now, there's a dissonance there that Republicans don't like. I think I'm much more sympathetic to immigration reform than most Republicans are, but how many of your members, probably none, face electoral defeat if they oppose immigration reform?
I don't know, but I think you would be shocked how many. I think most everybody in our party would vote for an immigration reform bill once they can be sure the border is secure. But until the border is secure,
legalization for the undocumented in the country right
I think we would get an agreement on all of those things. But if you pass a DREAM Act, so-called, right now, without the border being secured, then you're going to have another one and another one and another one, because people are going to continue to come. And I know, George, you had an editorial that commented we have a net about zero, but you still continue. Our Border Patrol are saying we're getting 3 to 5 times the numbers coming while we talk about legalization. Let's secure the border, and then I think we get a bill passed quickly.
The number of apprehensions, the crossings with Mexico is at a 40-year low. We have double the number of Border Patrol agents that we had in 2004 when President Bush was in office. So the border has never been more secure than it is now.
1916 it was. But
right now, the plan from Speaker John Boehner is to take immigration reform in pieces, to do border security first and then consider other aspects. Can that work? Is there a way to get comprehensive reform if the House follows that path?
Well, obviously, as Democrats, we would prefer one comprehensive bill. Theoretically, if you did it piecemeal, if you had a bill for each piece, you could send it to conference, have a final conference bill, and have each chamber pass it. But that doesn't seem to be the intention of the Republicans in the House.
Well, it looked like they're cherry picking. Leader Cantor is talking about the KIDS Act. Do you support the KIDS Act? I guess it's the DREAM Act.
I support securing the border, and until that, I don't think we ought to be talking about who gets legalized. Once we secure the border as determined by the border states, not Homeland Security. And by the way, you're new, you're brilliant, you're one of my favorite Democrats.
Thank you.
Here comes the but.
What I've learned in my 8 years, when you hear the word comprehensive, whether it's Republican or Democrat, it means we got a lot of bad laws we want to get passed, but we can't do it unless we have a really big bill.
George, you get the last word here.
Well, furthermore, the well has been poisoned irremediably by the fact that the president insists on his unilateral anti-constitutional power to rewrite laws and to simply not enforce portions of laws he doesn't like. No one on the Republican side believes that anything in the immigration bill will be binding on an unleashed president.
We're going to have to leave it right there.